HOA burned my ranch over a petty feud. Too bad I control statewide land grant approvals. Have you ever met someone so consumed by petty power that they'd burn down the world just to rule over the ashes? I bought the ranch as an escape. 300 acres of rolling hills, ancient oaks, and golden fields on the outskirts of Austin. It was my sanctuary from the world of bureaucratic paperwork, zoning commissions, and endless meetings that defined my job in the Texas State Land Office. Here, the only rules were dictated by the seasons and the needs of the land. Or so I thought. My property bordered a newer, meticulously manicured subdivision called Willow Creek Estates, and with it came its queen, Carol. She was the HOA president, a title she wore like a crown of thorns she expected everyone else to bleed from. Our first interaction was over my fence. It was a beautiful, historic fence made of reclaimed longleaf pine, weathered to a distinguished silver gray. It had stood on that land for nearly a century. To Carol, who drove up to my gate in her golf cart, her face a mask of pinched disapproval, it was an abomination. "Your fence is not in compliance," she announced, without so much as a hello. She held a clipboard as if it were a royal scepter. I smiled, leaning against the very fence in question. "Good morning to you too. I'm Elias. And compliance with what, exactly? My property isn't part of Willow Creek." She scoffed, a sound like air leaking from a punctured tire. "It's an eyesore visible from our community. The color is inconsistent. It lacks uniformity. It lowers our property values." I explained the concept of property lines, of history, of the fact that her HOA's jurisdiction ended about 50 feet from where she was standing. She wasn't listening. Her eyes were fixed on a point over my shoulder, a small, newly constructed greenhouse I'd built for a personal project. "And that structure," she said with disgust. "What is that? It looks like a toolshed. It's unpermitted." "It's a research greenhouse," I said, my patience thinning. "And it's on my land. I don't need your permission." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." That was the beginning. Over the next few months, I received a barrage of official-looking but legally meaningless violation notices from the Willow Creek HOA. My grass was too long. The native wildflowers I was cultivating were weeds. The sound of my tractor, operated well within legal daytime hours, was a nuisance. I ignored them, filing them away in a folder labeled absurdity. I had real work to do. The greenhouse project was my passion. In collaboration with Texas A&M's agricultural department, I was cultivating a new, experimental strain of drought-resistant prairie grass. With the state facing another brutal summer, this grass could be a game-changer, capable of saving ranchers millions in feed costs and preventing soil erosion on a massive scale. One of my partners on the project was a young, brilliant graduate student named Mateo. He was quiet, dedicated, and poured his heart into the research. He saw the project not just as a grade, but as a genuine way to help people, to help the land he loved. The conflict with Carol escalated. One evening, she stood at the property line and screamed at me for 10 minutes because the setting sun glinting off my greenhouse roof was distracting. I finally had enough and installed a series of high-resolution, night vision security cameras. I told myself it was for legal protection. I never imagined what they would actually capture. A week later, I was in Houston for a state-level meeting when my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a motion alert from my camera system. I opened the app expecting to see a deer or a coyote. Instead, my blood ran cold. The video feed showed a figure unmistakably Carol in her signature tracksuit sneaking onto my property. She was carrying a red gas can. With a chilling deliberation, she doused the base of my greenhouse and tossed a lit object. The structure went up in a whoosh of orange and black. She watched it burn for a full minute, a smug, satisfied smirk on her face before scurrying back toward her perfect, orderly kingdom. I sat there, frozen in my hotel room, watching the heart of my passion project, 5 years of research, turn to ash on a tiny screen. I called 911. My voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like ice. Then I called Mateo. The broken silence on the other end of the line was worse than any scream. "Everything, Elias?" he finally whispered. "It's all gone." "It's all gone," I confirmed, my voice hardening. But she made a mistake. A very, very big one. When I returned the next morning, the sight was devastating. The smell of charred wood and melted plastic hung heavy in the air. Firefighters and a sheriff's deputy were taking my statement. Mateo was there, just staring at the blackened skeleton of the greenhouse, his shoulders slumped. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with despair. She said she would do it, he said softly. What? When? I asked, my head snapping up. Yesterday. I was checking the irrigation lines near the fence. She saw me and said, that ugly thing is a blight. Some things just need to be purified by fire. I thought she was just being her usual crazy self. I didn't think she'd actually. His voice trailed off. Another nail in her coffin. But the true gravity of her act hadn't yet dawned on her. She had no idea what she had actually destroyed. And she had no idea who I was. To her, I was just some messy rancher who defied her authority. She didn't know that my official title was Director of Review for the Texas State Land Grant Board. Every major agricultural and conservation grant, every land use proposal, every large-scale development that required state approval passed across my desk. I held the keys to the kingdom she so desperately wanted to protect. The next HOA meeting was 2 days later. It was my stage. I walked in just as Carol was pontificating about the unacceptable shade of beige someone had painted their mailbox. The room was filled with about 30 residents. I walked to the front, my face calm, and waited. Carol glared at me. This is a private meeting for residents only. I'm not here as a resident, Carol. I'm here as the victim of a felony, I said, my voice quiet but carrying through the room. A murmur went through the crowd. On Tuesday night, my research facility was burned to the ground. An act of arson. She feigned a gasp, placing a hand over her heart. Oh my. That's terrible. I hope they find who did it. Her performance was flawless, full of saccharine sympathy. Oh, I think we will, I said, pulling a USB drive from my pocket. You see, the facility was a joint project with Texas A&M developing a new form of drought-resistant grass. It was funded by a state land grant. That makes its destruction a federal crime as well as a state one. It was a project that stood to benefit every landowner in this county, including all of you, by stabilizing the water table and boosting the local agricultural economy. The residents were now looking at each other, their expressions shifting from boredom to concern. Carol's smile tightened. What does this have to do with us? Everything, I said, plugging the drive into the community center's laptop and projector. Because the arsonist wasn't some random vandal. It was someone who valued their own petty sense of aesthetic control over the livelihoods of their neighbors and the future of Texas agriculture. I clicked play. The video filled the large screen at the front of the room. The image was perfectly clear. The gas can. The match. The smug smile illuminated by the flames she had birthed. The collective gasp in the room was sharp and sudden. All eyes darted from the screen to Carol, whose face had gone from pale to a mottled gray. Her mask of superiority didn't just crack, it disintegrated, revealing the panicked, cornered animal beneath. That's fake. It's doctored, she stammered, her voice a high-pitched squeak. As if on cue, the doors at the back of the room opened. 2 sheriff's deputies, a state fire marshal, and a stern-looking man in a suit walked in. I recognized him immediately. It was Alan Croft, the university's legal counsel. The fire marshal spoke first, his voice booming in the stunned silence. Carol Peters, we have a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of felony arson and destruction of state-funded property. Alan Croft stepped forward. Furthermore, Mrs. Peters, Texas A&M will be pursuing a civil suit for the full value of the lost research, estimated at $2.7 million plus punitive damages. The sound Carol made was a choked sob. The color had drained completely from her face. Her allies, the ones who had nodded along with her tyranny for years, suddenly found the floor intensely interesting. Not a single person would meet her desperate, pleading gaze. One of the deputies gently but firmly pulled her hands behind her back and cuffed her. As they led her away, she looked at me, her eyes a maelstrom of hate, fear, and utter disbelief. You? She hissed. Who even are you? I looked at her, my face devoid of emotion. I'm the man who signs off on the land grants. For example, the one your community was applying for next year to develop that new park and expand the community greenbelt. The application that is, as of this moment, permanently denied. The finality of my words hung in the air long after she was gone. The downfall was total. She lost her home to pay the legal fees and civil penalties. Her husband, a man who had enabled her for years, filed for divorce. Her name became a local curse, a cautionary tale of hubris. I felt a grim satisfaction but no joy. Standing on my land, looking at the scar where my greenhouse once stood, I just felt tired. The cost of that conflict was real, measured in more than just money. It was a stark reminder that some fires, once started, consume everything, leaving nothing behind but the bitter taste of ash. It makes you wonder, where is the line between protecting one's community and tyrannical control? And what is the true price of letting petty grievances fester into catastrophe?